As we move into the sermon time, there's an opportunity to pick up any last cards that may be lingering out there as questions, if you want to hold them up. As Dave was explaining, this morning is out of the ordinary. Today, rather than speaking about a specific topic, I am answering questions, not so much responding to concerns, but answering questions. This isn't a claim that I have the answer to your questions, and it's not a game of Stump the Minister. I've said this a lot, that I typically understand preaching as a conversation starter, to dig a little bit so that you go home and keep digging. That's partially because I'm reluctant to make any final truth claims about most of the big questions. It's also because that's how we do faith as Unitarian Universalists. We do it in conversation with one another. We build our beliefs in the midst of community as we compare and contrast what gives our lives meaning. I also wanted to mention that I probably won't have time to answer all of these. I know I won't have time to answer all of these, but I will hold on to anything and it will become fodder for future writing. So, let's get started. This first one says, why do you think Unitarian Universalism is not as well known or popular as other religions, given its long history and spirit of diverse inclusivity, i.e. women, people of color, LGBTQ, and varying religious beliefs? So there are two answers to this. One is a more comfortable one, and one is less comfortable. The more comfortable one is Unitarian Universalism is challenging. It requires a lot of us. It doesn't tell you what to believe. I think it would also be a little bit challenging to raise children in this faith, to say, kids, what do you think? Rather than giving them answers when they come home from school and say, this is what I heard on the playground. We also, the 7 principles are no joke. It's hard. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, that's a very tall order. Striving to believe that and live that out is a big ask. So that's my more comfortable answer. One is that it's hard, it's not an easy faith. Number 2 is that we are shy about our faith. We tend to strongly critique other people who share their faith with the world, and we don't share our own faith. I know a lot of us stumble over what to say we're doing on Sunday mornings. And it doesn't even matter, really, if you call it church or congregation or Tapestry or whatever. We're shy about it, and there's a little bit of a sense of exceptionalism, that we're somehow different than the other incredible faith traditions that are loving communities that are supporting one another and doing great things in the world. There was a UUA publicity campaign, and I did a whole sermon on this, and it was a bumper sticker that called us the uncommon denomination, which in my mind is like the worst advertising campaign ever. But I think deep down a lot of us hold that sense of exceptionalism, and that does not do a good service when we try to reach out and grow our faith. So that's why I think, and I think it's Thomas Jefferson. There's one of the very early prominent Americans who said back then, I believe Unitarianism will be the great American religion. So this is not new for 2021 for us to be asking, where is everyone? People have been saying that for a long time. But it's a good question that we might ask ourselves more often. Oh, Lord. What values are most important to you, and or what characteristics do most of your friends share in common? Okay, that's easier. What do most of my friends share in common? Curiosity is, in terms of my friends, is very, very important to me. People who, I just got back on a trip from hiking with friends and family. Curiosity is exciting in other people. You get to learn some of what they get excited about in the world, and you get to share ideas. So yeah, curiosity, humility is important to me. I try to be a humble person. It's one of the things that I find off-putting most quickly in other people, folks that are quite proud of their achievements, no matter how large or small. And honesty, I think. I think honesty is something that we would all say is a value. That's harder said than, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Like, tell the truth. It's not that big of a deal. But actually telling the truth, speaking your mind even when it's uncomfortable, honesty is a difficult thing, and it's something that I value a lot. Speaking of honesty, this question is truth absolute or is it relative to one's perspective? It's funny, this just came up 2 weeks ago. When I first came to Tapestry, I changed our covenant that we read together in the service every Sunday. The standard one reads, to seek the truth in love. And I removed the word the 7 years ago, I believe. It just came up in conversation because our old PowerPoint slide deck, we had a mismatch. Like one had the word the and one didn't. So 7 years ago, I clearly had a strong belief that truth is relative. And having visited other cultures that are profoundly different and live in the world in different, with very different sets of truths, and still thrive in the world and find meaning and life, then I would still have to stick with the idea that it is relative. I'm reluctant to come down on one single pinpointed truth, and I see scientists squirming and engineers squirming, but that's my answer. How can Unitarian Universalists find happiness with so much unhappiness in the world? And should we? Keeping it light. Yes, I think we should. During our COVID time, I started up a Wednesday night meditation group doing mindfulness meditation. Around the same time, I also developed that practice more in myself. To me, more and more I'm thinking that being present in the moment, like being aware that we are here together in a comfortable room with lovely people, that we're alive to varying degrees, we are healthy, and living in that one moment is like really key to happiness. I mean, a lot of you probably watched the news this morning. You're worrying about 1,000 things that aren't happening here and now. What happens when you go back to work tomorrow? Whatever. The more and more I think about happiness, the more and more I realize it's a practice of being here and being present to what's happening. It's funny, I was actually, as I was hiking, I was thinking about this on the trail. I was with these friends, and the question of sort of long-term goals came up, like what do you want most? And I realized that was one of the things that I want most is happiness. Not that I'm an unhappy person, but to make the pursuit of happiness, not pleasure, but happiness, made sense as a very worthwhile and challenging at times goal. Should we? Yes, I think we should. I think if we don't care, it's just like any other caring for other people or caring for the world. If we don't care for ourselves, if we don't find some happiness wherever we can find it, there's not going to be much left to give or to respond or to do what needs to be done. And And I don't want that to sound naive either. You all have heard me preach. There's some terrible things happening in the world, and we have to acknowledge them at the same time. We can't be, the phrase I like is bliss-ninnies, of just sticking our head in the sand and drinking our kombucha and saying everything's going to be okay. Like, we have to acknowledge pain and suffering in the world, but at the same time, our task is to find happiness in that. How do you deal with personal moments of doubt about your faith or mission in life? How do you deal with personal moments of doubt or doubt about your faith or mission in life? Unitarian Universalism, I said, is a challenging faith. We ask a lot of people. The flip side of that is there's a whole lot of room. So as I have, over the years, vacillated between having more theistic, almost very liberal Christian sense of faith and prayer life to pretty solidly humanist and sometimes atheist, there's obviously room for that full swing within our faith tradition. So that doubt in my faith is not so much, it's not a challenge in Unitarian Universalism. In fact, and I would say this to all of you, you might look at those changes as growth. Not that, oh, what I used to believe was wrong, or that I'm letting go of something, but maybe I'm moving into something, or learning something, or growing into something, and that's a wonderful thing. Since our theme for the month is journey, we can talk about it as a journey, I suppose. Mission in life, that's interesting. I don't know. I think we all have sort of existential doubts. I just turned, well, I'm 42. It's midlife crisis time, right? One looks back and one looks forward, and there's a limited time to accomplish what you want to do. I bought a sailboat and lived on it for a year. That's what I did. So I don't know. I'll say dig into doubt. Doubt is your friend. Yeah, but little doubt's not going to kill you. How can we bring all world religions to work together, support each other, and unite to resolve world hunger and climate change? This is actually a really good question. Part of the answer, I think, is in the question. Many years ago, when I was serving the UU congregation in Laguna Beach, our interfaith council there was very diverse religiously and very diverse politically. I'll never forget walking into the LDS church for one of their meetings, like a couple of days after Proposition 8, and like having to force myself through the door. The reason why we were able to work together is because we were working on the issue of homelessness in town. And that is such a basic human compassion issue, particularly because it was direct services for people who were experiencing homelessness. There was nothing political about it. So that's why I say the answer is a bit in this question. It's talking about hunger and climate change. Climate change is a little political. Hunger is pretty darn simple. Like, if you can't come together to feed people, we got bigger problems. So I think rallying together different beliefs, whether they're political or religious, you start with a very common denominator of basic people suffering. Like, the idea that people are hungry in the world is unacceptable, and we're called to do what we can to work on it. Yeah, So finding those common areas that we can work on together. And the other piece that happened in Laguna Beach in working together was building real relationship and cultivating some curiosity about one another. While we were working on homelessness, we could say, oh, we're pretty different on this over here. And we could talk sort of around the periphery of what that was about. You don't dive into abortion or dive into those big hot button issues, but you can begin to understand each other and to see that your values are pretty similar. You just have a very different interpretation about those things. Yeah. And a lot of this is happening. This isn't a pipe dream. There are great organizations that are dealing with climate change and hunger. Religious organizations. What do you do when life gets in the way? What do you do when life gets in the way? I'm not sure exactly what this is getting at, but what I will say is I think this is why it's important to have spiritual practices and some routine of checking in or caring for yourself, because we all know life can get, there are 1,000 different things to do, even in retirement, from what I understand. I have heard people say they're busier now than when they were working, and I have seen it among you. So having whatever it is, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is in your day, whether it's exercise or a meditation or writing in a journal or whatever it is, having that routine sets up a practice so that when life does get overwhelming, it's there to fall back on, and you can realize, oh, I stopped doing this. This was something that's important to me. So yeah, routine and practice keeps you anchored. What about your recent hike would you consider spiritual? So I kind of knew this was going to come up. So I just got back last night from hiking the southernmost portion of the John Muir Trail. So 5 days on the trail, including Mount Whitney 2 days ago. So if I'm walking a little funny, it's because my legs are still a little wobbly. It was amazing. So part of it was being with a brother and some good friends and being with him last night and laughing until we were all literally crying. To me, being around people that you're close with is a huge part of spirituality and feeling connected. Obviously, being in nature, for me, nature has always been the quickest and most immediate sense of spiritual connection and groundedness, even when I was a child. Fortunately, my parents took us out into nature quite a bit, and I certainly didn't recognize it as such and wouldn't have called it that as a child, but there was definitely a sense of awe and wonder and connection that happened there very easily. You sit there and it happens. It's kind of amazing. And then the other thing, as I mentioned, I was hiking Mount Whitney yesterday. Some of you may have done it. It's precarious. In fact, we were just Googling how many people die hiking Mount Whitney every year. It's several. And one of the people with us was afraid of heights. She was like, I didn't even think of this until I got up here. So it was a reminder of, to get through those things, you literally have to focus on the path right in front of you. And every once in a while you say, oh, that's pretty, or this perspective is amazing. But to get where you're going, you just have to focus on the next little thing, which was a good reminder for me. We have lots of activities listed weekly in the order of service, but very few people participate. How do we get more involvement? That's a good question. It may be better for you to answer that question. One, I think, so our church is very much in flux as we're coming back into real life. Worship attendance is going to be fluctuating for, I think, a couple of months. Just so you know, we're averaging probably 25 people online. So this room feels a little bit empty right now, but know that there are more, hi, we see you, we love you. More people at home. I think a lot is also shifting with activities as people are chomping at the bit to go travel. I would also say what I have seen most successful in Tapestry's history have been the programs that come up organically from within the congregation, the things that people are really excited about and rope their friends into doing with them, and those blossom and grow into big, exciting activities. The things, this is going to sound kind of whiny, but the things that I put together because I'm interested in them and just kind of plop an advertisement in the order of service is very different from it happening organically from within the congregation. So get excited about things and make it happen in the congregation. I think that's the most successful. And I'll do one last one. I don't know how to respond when young adults say they don't want to bring kids into the world. I did fortunately have a chance to get a little bit of background on this question before the service. The idea is, especially among progressive young people, with global warming and economic challenges and all sorts of different things, people are reluctant to have children, understandably. I would say be honest with them. And being of that generation, I can totally understand it. It would be a big, big question. As potential grandparents, I would say be honest with them. It's an opportunity to share with your kids how much joy parenting has been for you, and you can say that without it being a guilt trip. So yeah, let them know that that's a sad thing. And back to that earlier question, global warming is a very, very sad thing, but we can maintain happiness and still acknowledge stuff going on in the world. So be honest with them. It's a hard conversation for sure. And I believe that is what we have time for. I have another card or two that will stick with me for sermon writing fodder, and I'll actually keep all of these because these are good questions. So thank you.